Hey class, so today I am going to be doing a book review of the book that we've been reading for the past few weeks, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Um, as you listen to this or watch this, I'd like you guys to follow along with the worksheet I passed out, where you're going to be writing down the author's name, the claim I make, major themes, evidence, which is the quotes I'll be reading, and the reasoning I use to explain this. I'm not going to explicitly say this is evidence or this is a reasoning, but with the practice we've been doing, you guys should be able to identify it. It's okay if you mess up a little bit, or if you get maybe a little bit of a different variation on what I said the claim was. I want this to be in your own words, so relax and just enjoy. Okay, guys? So let's start out. So this is Catcher in the Rye. It is one of my favorite books. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a summary and then including the claim and evidence and reasoning in there. So, yep, here we go. So we begin the story in the perspective of a 16-year-old boy named Holden Caulfield, who was just expelled from his boarding school for poor grades. Right off the bat, we're exposed to Holden's sardonic sense of humor and pessimistic attitude. Like most 16-year-olds, Holden Caulfield is at the point in adolescence where he's being exposed to the world around him, is losing his sense of childhood innocence, and is left disappointed by the reality that the world is a harsh and complex place with both goodness and badness all around. Salinger uses Holden Caulfield as a symbol both for lost innocence and a desperation to maintain innocence in a fallen and corrupt world. In the first two chapters, Holden visits the home of one of his teachers, Mr. Spencer, who gives him life advice that Holden disregards as inaccurate and irrelevant. We come to find that Holden is outwardly a polite kid, but inwardly, Holden is very judgmental and contrary. He tends to see others as the enemy or enemy-like figures, and holds an odd belief that the world is full of phonies and is out to get him. In the next few chapters, Holden is back in his dormitory speaking with his roommate Stradlater, who comes in to talk about the date he's about to go on. The girl's name is Jane, and she happens to be an old friend of Holden's. Holden talks about how Jane had a rough childhood, and one can see that Holden holds an admiration for Jane, even though he doesn't want to go and say hi to her. When Stradlater returns from his date, Holden gives him a paper he had written for him, and Stradlater becomes angry because Holden didn't follow the prompt correctly. This begins an argument due to the fact that Holden wrote about something sentimental, and Stradlater is not only failing to appreciate that, but is berating Holden. With tensions already high, the boys begin discussing Stradlater's date. Holden and Jane, summers ago, played checkers together, and Jane always kept her kings in the back row to protect them, despite them being the most powerful pieces on the board. Salinger writes, "I told him he thought he could give the time to anybody he felt like. I told him he didn't even care if a girl kept all her kings in the back row or not, and the reason he didn't care was because he was a goddamn stupid moron." And that is on page 57. So here we are exposed to a key detail of not only the personality of Holden, but what he symbolically stands for as a character. Jane keeping her kings in the back row represents a sense of innocence, which Holden admires in a corrupt world. Jane keeps her most powerful pieces in the back of the board, where she will do no harm, but where they will find no harm either. When Holden finds that Stradlater may have taken a nice girl like Jane out to use her and have sex with her, he becomes furious at the compromise of her innocence. Holden is not necessarily jealous, although it may seem like it on the surface, but instead angry that somebody could corrupt goodness and purity and not even care. This then sparks a physical fight between the boys, and Holden ends up leaving his boarding school for good that night. Holden takes a train from his boarding school to New York City, where he meets the mother of a fellow student he didn't like and yet claims to have been friends with. He praises the boy, despite internally degrading him, just for the sake of making the mother happy, and then lies about his age so he can drink with her. Holden, despite his young age, has graying hair and uses this throughout the story to drink underage and to try to convince people that he's older than he is. But this gray hair doesn't represent his aging. It represents the loss of innocence he has experienced as he has aged. His childlike wonder and purity is fading, and in its place is loss, death, and the mark of experience. Holden talks about the next few days he spends in New York City, staying at hotels, spending nights out drinking, and with old friends and girlfriends. And through all of this, we are left with the impression that Holden is overwhelmingly dissatisfied with the world around him and his oncoming adulthood. While considering that his role in the world will be while considering what his role in the world will be someday, Holden hears someone misquoting a poem of people catching bodies in the Rye. And Holden imagines a world where children were all running towards some sort of trouble, and in the Rye, he was catching them and keeping them safe. While Holden is at his home visiting his little sister Phoebe in the night, she expresses her disappointment at Holden being expelled and asks him what he's going to do with his life. Salinger writes, and this is on page 224, "You know that song, If a Body Catch a Body Coming Through the Rye? It's If a Body Meet a Body Coming Through the Rye," old Phoebe said. "It's a poem by Robert Burns." "I know it's a poem by Robert Burns." She was right, though. It is. If a body meet a body coming through the Rye. I didn't know it then, though. "I thought it was a body catch a body," I said. "Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids and nobody's around, nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I just be the catcher in the Rye and all." In this, Holden expresses to Phoebe his desire to save children from falling into the corruption of the world and to protect their childlike innocence. And Phoebe, a sort of symbol of childlike innocence in Holden's life, corrects Holden that the poem actually says if a body meets a body, a statement which has sexual undertones. Holden expresses his desire to save childhood innocence and in the same moment realizes his sister is growing up. And even the poem, which describes the future he wishes to have, is marred by a sort of adult-like corruption, depicts the irony in the story, one Holden has not yet fully realized. Near the end of the story, Holden is at a museum waiting for his sister to arrive so that he can say goodbye before running away when two little boys approach Holden and ask for directions to the mummies. Holden brings them there, reminiscing on how the mummies were one of his favorite exhibits as a child. Once there, Holden sees once again, just as he did at Phoebe's school, a "fuck you" written on the wall. Suddenly, Holden is hit with a realization. Salinger writes, "If you had 1,000,000 years to do it, you couldn't rub out even half the fuck you signs in the world. It's impossible." And that's on page 262. At this point, Holden has finally realized that no matter how precious childhood and innocence are, they cannot be kept forever. The world is corrupt just as much as it has its badness. There is just as much, if not more, good. Holden could not save the world, he could not save his sister, and he could not save all the innocents, but he needed to save himself. In this quote, Holden's full purpose as a symbol of lost innocence and desperation are actualized, and Holden comes to terms with this. In the conclusion of The Catcher in the Rye, Holden brings his sister to the zoo and watches as she rides the carousel, always reaching towards a golden ring that she will never grasp. Holden has fully come to terms with the fact that there are some things in life that are out of our control, some goodness that cannot be saved, and that everyone grows up. So now that we're coming to an end, I just want to say that The Catcher in the Rye is and always has been one of my favorite books. Although when I did first read it when I was 16 years old, I didn't love it. I thought it was good, I liked it, but I didn't love it. It's only as I got older that I started really appreciating it and really loving it. I remember I read it again my freshman year of college, and it really hit me how powerful and beautiful of a story it is, which I think is, in a lot of ways, the point of the story, is that as you get older, you realize more things, and you know, there's obviously badness in this world, but there's so many things that you come to appreciate as you get old, and so many things that you come to love. I believe its themes are timeless. All of us have some of Holden inside of us, and all of us, like Holden, must come to terms with that. So thank you guys for listening, and have a great week. If you have any questions on the assignment, please let me know. Bye!